Welcome to this explainer where we're diving straight into the wildly complicated truth behind the man who, honestly, practically invented modern hype, P.T. Barnum. Now, if you've seen the recent Hollywood movies, you're probably picturing this singing, dancing, incredibly romanticized hero. But the source material? Well, it reveals a reality that is way darker, much more twisted, and ultimately an absolute masterclass in capturing human attention and spinning it into massive wealth.
To really get a grip on his undeniable marketing genius, we've got to start with his core philosophy on getting attention, at literally any cost. Barnum firmly believed that, quote, without promotion, something terrible happens. Nothing. And you know, this wasn't just some catchy slogan for him. It was the exact blueprint he used to build an absolute fortune, lose every penny of it, and then somehow rise right back up from the ashes to create a global empire.
Let's jump right into Section 1, the art of the hustle.
So back in his early days in Connecticut, a young Barnum quickly figured out that persuasion, not hard manual labor, was his actual superpower. Working at his dad's general store, he learned how to completely outnegotiate customers who tried to pull a fast one on him. But his early side hustles are what truly showed his colors. Like he launched this local lottery, promising that every single ticket was a guaranteed winner. The catch? The prizes were just a massive overstock of cheap, shiny glass bottles he traded for in bulk. It was a total hoax, but hey, it worked. Later on, he founded his own newspaper, the Herald of Freedom, and basically used it to spread rumors. That actually landed him in jail for libel for 60 days. But here's the most incredible part. While he was sitting behind bars, he managed to orchestrate his very own triumphant release parade complete with a marching band. Barnum was just constantly manufacturing his own reality and making everyone else believe his narrative.
Now, his first major, though incredibly exploitative, financial win happened when he moved to New York. Using a legal loophole, Barnum literally leased an enslaved, elderly, disabled woman named Joyce Heth for $1,000. He turned around and marketed her as George Washington's 161-year-old nurse. He completely flooded the press with these wild, exaggerated claims to drum up immense curiosity. And get this, when ticket sales started to dip, he anonymously wrote to the newspapers himself, claiming she wasn't even human, but a machine. Obviously, crowds rushed right back to verify it for themselves. Sadly, following her death, he even sold tickets to her autopsy. When all was said and done, he turned a $1,000 lease into a $10,000 profit. To put that into perspective, that's roughly $330,000 in today's money.
All right, moving on to Section 2, building the American Museum.
Barnum took those new profits and bought this struggling museum right in New York City. And to get curious feet through the door, he used totally deceptive advertising. For example, he'd hype up this alluring mythical Fiji mermaid in the papers, but what paying visitors actually saw was the lower half of a fish crudely sewn to the upper half of a monkey. I mean, it was hideous. But Barnum didn't care at all. He intentionally sparked a fake national debate over whether it was real, because to him, it totally didn't matter if you were disappointed by the mermaid, as long as that controversy got you inside his massive museum, where thousands of other real exhibits were waiting to entertain you. He also basically perfected the concept of FOMO, the fear of missing out, way before it was an internet acronym. He found a 4-year-old boy with dwarfism named Charlie Stratton, taught him to sing, dance, and do Napoleon impersonations, and completely rebranded him as General Tom Thumb. To whip the public into a frenzy, Barnum just constantly lied in his ads, always claiming that Tom Thumb was leaving town soon. And you know what? This manufactured urgency worked brilliantly. People practically trampled each other to buy tickets before the act supposedly disappeared. Eventually, they really did head to England, where Barnum somehow scored a private audience with Queen Victoria. After Tom Thumb completely charmed the royal family, Barnum pulled his signature FOMO trick once again, announcing an imminent departure to skyrocket ticket sales. The result? He pocketed the modern equivalent of $12 million in just 4 short months. Unbelievable. Which brings us to Section 3, the Swedish Nightingale.
So by now, Barnum was incredibly wealthy, but he was mostly known for, well, lowbrow curiosities and what were essentially freak shows. He wanted high society respect, so he took a massive gamble. Think about it. How do you sell out a massive tour for an act nobody in the country has ever even seen? Well, he risked his entire reputation and fortune to bring European opera superstar Jenny Lind, the Swedish Nightingale, over to America. Because of his shady past, he had to offer her a totally unprecedented $187,000 signing bonus just to get her to agree. And the craziest part of all of this? He did this before he ever heard her sing a single note. He just blindly trusted her European reputation.
To hype up her arrival, Barnum put on an absolute masterclass in public relations. He auctioned off the very first tickets to her shows for up to $650, which guaranteed massive press coverage for the winners. He famously operated under the belief that, quote, "I don't care what the newspapers say about me as long as they spell my name right." He even stooped to planting fake negative stories about his own greed in the papers. Why on earth would he do that? Well, Jenny Lind was donating huge sums of money to charity, money that was often secretly funded by Barnum himself. So by anonymously attacking his own selfishness in the press, he made Jenny look like an absolute saint and kept both of their names plastered in the headlines constantly.
The PR spin was flawless. In just 9 months of touring, Lind made a fortune, and Barnum walked away with over $500,000. That is about $21 million today. And this tour didn't just line his pockets, it completely legitimized him, cementing his status as a globally respected celebrity.
All right, Section 4, Bankruptcy and Burning Down.
Honestly, it's almost hard to believe one person endured such a crazy chain of back-to-back disasters. Flushed with all this cash, Barnum started making some really terrible, overconfident bets, like pouring money into a clock-making company that completely collapsed. By 1856, he was forced into bankruptcy and literally had to move his family into a tiny rental apartment. And if that wasn't bad enough, the very next year, his mansion burned to a crisp. He painstakingly clawed his way out of debt by touring Europe again, only for his beloved American Museum to catch fire and burn to the ground in 1865, which tragically killed the animals trapped inside. Undeterred, he built a second, even bigger museum, which, you guessed it, also burned to the ground in 1868. At that point, Barnum actually decided to retire.
But not for long. Section 5, the greatest show on earth.
So, the biggest problem with running a massive traveling circus is the absolute operational nightmare of moving it. Delays mean you're losing money. So Barnum completely revolutionized touring logistics. He figured out exactly how to pack a massive circus, which was effectively the size of a small town, onto 65 railroad cars, travel overnight, and completely set up the entire show within 24 hours. Sure, it took a few disastrous attempts to actually get it right, but once they nailed it, this rapid turnaround saved immense amounts of time and pushed their profits well past the $1 million mark.
But then, a fierce rival named James Bailey entered the picture. Bailey actually took Barnum's own PR tricks and used them against him, publicly mocking Barnum's $100,000 offer for an elephant in his own newspaper ads. But instead of getting into this ruinous, ego-driven competition, Barnum just reached out and proposed a merger. They created a 50-50 circus monopoly. Together, they innovated the very first 3-ring circus, meaning they had 3 distinct acts happening simultaneously, and famously purchased Jumbo, a massive 7-ton elephant, which basically launched their popularity straight into the stratosphere. This leads us to our final part, Section 6, A Complicated Legacy. P.T. Barnum died in 1891, and he was working right up until his very last days. Now, as we mentioned earlier, modern Hollywood films heavily romanticize him, but looking at it impartially, his life presents a really stark contrast. On the one hand, we see undeniable exploitation and hoaxes, leasing enslaved women for profit, building deceptive exhibits, and overseeing instances of severe animal cruelty. Yet, at the exact same time, he provided incredibly lucrative careers for outcasts who literally had no other options, paying them very well. He eventually completely shifted his political views to become a pro-union abolitionist, and he generously funded local community hospitals.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're really left with a massive question. Was he a monster or was he a marketing genius? He undeniably brought joy to millions and essentially laid the groundwork for the modern concepts of hype and publicity that we see everywhere today. But his methods were deeply, deeply flawed. So how should history ultimately judge the greatest showman? Is it even possible to separate that incredible business acumen from the exploitation that fueled it? Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the history behind the hype.